This is Larry Bauer, Chief Executive Officer of the Family Medicine Education Consortium, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Eric Porfelli and Dr. Jenna Weisblatt from Northeastern Ohio Medical University, who are the chief architects and shakers and movers with the Health Profession Affinity Community Project. And Dr. Porfelli and Dr. Weisblatt, I'm going to turn things over to you now, and if you would take us away.
Thank you, Larry. We appreciate the opportunity to connect with all of you and share with you a bit about our work and how you might take that work and leverage it with your existing resources to continue to advance your respective missions. I am Eric Porfelli. I'm the Associate Dean for Community Engagement and Admissions in the College of Medicine at NEOMED. I'm also the co-director of the Ohio Alliance.
Hi, I'm Jenna Weisblatt, and I am the Director of Education for Service in the Dean's Office, and I'm a faculty member in Family and Community Medicine. And I'm so excited to see all of you listed here, and looking forward to having an opportunity to share with you our work and get some of your insights today as we kind of move along and continue to grow.
So moving on to the agenda for our meeting today, we're going to talk about three major elements. The first is we're going to talk about the context that exists here in our community and in Ohio more generally that fostered the development of what we're referring to as a new kind of pipeline program and alliance. We're then going to talk specifically about the Health Professions Affinity Community Program, and then we're going to talk about how that program is situated within a broader Ohio alliance devoted to advancing the health and vitality of communities through health professions pathways. At the end, we'll reserve time for questions and discussion because we find that that's where most of the action usually occurs in these conversations. And so please bear with us as we outline what we've done, and we look forward to, at the end of the session, talking with each of you about your perspectives and how we can all grow together.
Is there a quick way, in case folks have a question as we're moving along, that they can connect into us? Can someone give that direction?
So, Larry, do you know if there's a way for people to text questions to us through the system? You might be on mute right now.
So I just took myself off mute. So I believe should be a window in there where you can text or type a message that would come through to me.
For everybody, it's in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. I just discovered it. It's the little dialog box in the bottom left-hand side of your browser. If you click on it, you can text us questions and chat with everybody. Okay, thanks for that housekeeping item, Jenna.
No problem.
All right, now we'll move on. So in terms of the very broad context of our medical school, we have a fourfold mission that's devoted, particularly in the academic space, towards advancing students who are academically prepared for the rigors of medical school, who are overly committed, disproportionately committed to primary care medicine, those that are strongly committed to medically underserved communities, and those that value and reflect the diversity of the communities we serve. So for everything from our pipeline programming through our pre-medical partnerships and ultimately into our medical school is devoted to advancing a student body reflective of these characteristics. That being said, we're not looking for any one student to necessarily be all of these things in perfect order, but we're looking for the student body to strongly reflect these four characteristics. And it was these four characteristics that guided Jenna and I's work over the past several years to develop programs, to develop partnerships, to strengthen programs and partnerships, and ultimately establish programs like the Health Professions Affinity Community Program and also our Ohio Alliance. In terms of the community context, our work is born out of a variety of communities in Northeast Ohio and Ohio generally. But this is an illustration of one of those communities and both the opportunities and the challenges that we face. So this is these four maps are four different maps of Cuyahoga County. Cuyahoga County is the county of Cleveland. It's the home of the Republican National Convention this year. So many of you on your TVs had an opportunity to see bits and pieces of Cleveland over the past few months. The upper left map is color-coded by those communities that are medically underserved with a particular focus on primary care. Colored shades mean those communities are more or less underserved. Light or no shading reflects communities that are not underserved. The upper right picture is the density of African American people in Cuyahoga County, with darker shades meaning more African American people. The bottom left picture is color-coded by virtue of who's recipients of food stamps, with darker shades meaning more recipients, higher density of recipients. And then the bottom right is the color coding in terms of students currently in our medical college who sourced from Cuyahoga County communities, with darker shades reflecting more students and white reflecting no students. And I think what you'll see, I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, but if you can't, just squint your eyes and notice that there's a C shape in every one of the maps where we have certain communities within Cuyahoga County that are the most medically underserved, the most distressed, have the highest fraction of minorities, and that yet in the bottom right map you'll see that we are sourcing very few, if any, students from those communities in that C shape. So that is both the challenge and the opportunity of the work that Jenna and I and many others do. Specifically, we believe strongly that there are students in those communities in that C shape who may become excellent healthcare professionals, but often lack the vital necessary resources to live day to day, let alone succeed in high school and college at the level needed to be prepared for the rigors of health professions training, whether it be medical school, nursing school, pharmacy school, whatever health professions you're considering.
The other thing I would add to what Eric's saying there is that as you think about those folks having not necessarily all the resources to get to that point, they're also in a context where the paradigm of healthy living and being able to care for health has also suffered some circumstances due to the needs of those communities. And that's something to think about through the process, because that health and life success are linked.
And the other thing we'll say here is that this is the customary view of communities that are distressed. They're lacking. They need things. They need help from others. And from the very beginning, in the roots of Jenna's career as a community organizer and me as a social worker originally, we recognize these communities have a wealth of resources that are often under-recognized, underutilized, and oftentimes not oriented towards goals like empowering people to advance their own health. And so at once we recognize that there are deficits, but we also recognize that these communities we're talking about have resources, riches of resources in certain ways, and our job is to partner with them to help them to identify and ultimately support them in differently utilizing those resources to advance health goals and career goals. So moving on to the next slide, I'll show one other additional element to this, which is you've seen the one on the left. That's where our students come from in Cuyahoga County and don't come from. And on the right is a color coding of the same county in terms of where all of our alumni in the College of Medicine, since our inception, consider their primary address to be. And so you'll see that if we do not disrupt how we're systematically sourcing and not sourcing our students, we see that the outcome is that same C shape of deficit in terms of where our alumni are going and ultimately living and working. And this is a pattern that we believe strongly must be disrupted if we're going to take a population health perspective on revamping and innovating our healthcare system and workforce. So in terms of other elements of context in Ohio, Ohio is blessed with a very robust, extensive healthcare network. 3 of the top 10 employers in Ohio are hospital systems, and I suspect that the hospital systems are a big player in Pennsylvania, having been there myself and been a graduate of both Pitt and Penn State. Yes, I'm a little schizophrenic, I admit. And also, in Ohio, we find that healthcare jobs are the fastest growing, one of the most fastest growing sectors in Ohio, and that each physician is bringing more than $2 million in annual revenue to a community. So when we're talking about sourcing students for and from Ohio, the good news is we have plenty of jobs for them, and if we can secure jobs for them, we know that they bring revenue to communities. And if they bring that revenue to economically distressed communities, they bring a particular benefit that is exceptional relative to a physician being placed in an affluent suburb where there are an overabundance of resources. So in terms of a little bit more about NEOMED, we were born as a medical school for 3 universities. At the time, back in the 70s, there were 3 universities in Northeast Ohio all vying for a medical school, and the governor basically said, you're right, we need a state-funded medical school in Northeast Ohio, but I'm not going to be so unwise as to give it to any one of you, and so you're all going to have to share. And we became the state medical school in Northeast Ohio for Kent State, the University of Akron, and Youngstown State. Several years ago, we became a freestanding state university instead of just being a college of medicine of these 3 universities. And we ultimately then became, we developed a new name from NEO-UCOM. We became NEOMED, and now we have colleges of medicine, pharmacy, and graduate studies. That enabled us also to develop a host of pre-medical partners. And now today, we allocate about 148 of our medical school seats to pre-medical MD pathways with the universities that are listed there on the screen. Now, naturally, when we do offer early admission in these pathways, a fraction of students ultimately decide not to come to us, or they don't come based on their progress in the pre-medical phase, and so that allows us to then also admit some fraction of direct entry medical students on an annual basis. I share this slide with you because it suggests clearly that for NEOMED, given all of these pre-medical MD pathways, our recruitment must begin in the K-12 years because our students are being admitted earlier than your typical medical student, but we also have those being admitted in the college years. So like other medical schools, we also must do engagement in the college years for students who can apply to our various pathways, which poses a unique challenge for us, but it also offers a unique opportunity because it gives us additional justification to partner with K-12 school districts and undergraduate schools in a way that other medical schools may not have that energy to do so.
So the only thing I'll add to what Eric just said there is that there is a real advantage in diversification of source. So because of the way things were set up, I don't think it was intentional, but we ended up being really lucky because each one of our partners, if you look at it, you could see them as competitors, or you could see them all as having a unique set of assets and specialties that they bring to the table. And when you link all those together, you have this wonderful opportunity to diversify your opportunities to your students and workforce in turn. And so that's been a real advantage for us.
And we'll talk more about what that looks like a little later in the presentation. So as I mentioned earlier, we offer a variety of pathways to our medical school, and that diversifies the kinds of students who are interested. It diversifies opportunities for the students, but it also then prompts us to diversify our programming. In terms of the overall system that we are endeavoring to innovate and build, it starts with recruitment and pipeline programs in the K-12 space. It leads to admissions in the early college years and then ultimately into other direct entry pathways I mentioned. We then have these pre-medical partners who are not only partnering with us in the recruitment and pipeline program space, but they're also innovating their pre-medical curriculum to ally with our mission, so that as we're recruiting kids from the local community who are committed to primary care, who are committed to diversity in the medically underserved, they're coming into a pre-medical curriculum that allies with that and celebrates it. So by the time they come to the medical school, they've had several years of engagement in our mission before they meet the formal medical school curriculum. It is an entire system that we're trying to build here.
Those early pathways also, as Eric was talking about, they engineer and socially shape those students. based on where institution they're coming from, what the strengths of those are. So, for example, a Hiram College, which we'll talk about in a little bit, does pieces around humanistic components of the curriculum. And that is absolutely critical for bringing a new lens to how the students work together when they come to NEOMED.
Yeah, and then at Cleveland State, being an urban serving university, their focus in their pre-medical partnership with us is on urban health. And all of our pipeline programs reflect that flavor of that community, and we'll talk about how our program is adaptable to the community. So in the next slide, we're going to now talk just very briefly about the educational funnel. I think this is important to point out because it shows the nature of our challenge as a system of educators trying to advance primary care, and it also speaks to the needs of why we need a new kind of pipeline program and pathways to address it. So if you look at the left there, that is basically an image of what's considered broadly as the admissions funnel, the funnel that leads people from the community and ultimately to medical school, whether it be the MD or the DO. And along the way, students have to go to university and get an undergraduate degree in most cases. And then ultimately they work themselves through a medical school admissions and recruitment admissions process that leads a very narrow slice to become a medical student. And when you look at the research in this funnel and you look at trends as to how the populations differ, you find that people in the community in general have a lower socioeconomic status than those who get admitted to medical school. You find that those in the community reflect a higher percentage of urban, inner-city urban, and remote rural communities as compared to those who ultimately get admitted to medical school. And you find that there is lower overall academic performance in the community as compared to those who get into medical school. And this is where things get interesting. So think of these trends: lower to higher SES, higher to lower a reflection of urban and rural communities, lower to higher academic achievement. And if we now look at the research on the primary care funnel, which there is quite a bit of research in this space going back several decades, that research suggests that those who go into primary care as compared to those medical students who don't tend to come from a lower socioeconomic status, tend to come from rural communities, and tend to have actually lower undergrad performance and medical school performance in some cases. That research in the last part is somewhat mixed, but that is a trend. So that being said, when you think back to the previous slide, who is not getting into medical school, and then you go to the next slide, which is who goes into primary care, what you ultimately realize is that the funnel leading from the community to primary care is systematically eliminating students that are most predisposed to primary care before they get into medical school. And that demonstrates that everything we do from community engagement through pre-medical preparation and ultimately into admissions in medical school has to be reorganized in a manner that builds towards students who are most predisposed to primary care, but currently the system that exists tends to work against those characteristics.
Yeah, and I'll just add one other thing. The research right now is very clear. We used to be looking at research that went back to middle school preferences, of career, etc., achievements, so on and so forth. And now, recently, 2016, there's been a number of studies that have been published that the gap begins in kindergarten in terms of science, and that gap can actually be eliminated if students are given an opportunity to learn methodology early on and work their way through that, and it's paid attention throughout. We also know, for example, by third grade, if students haven't been addressed on reading challenges, they will fall behind their peers significantly, and this will impact their opportunities. So it really is a community-based. It can't just be, we're going to pull one student from here or there, we're going to focus on that. We have to go back to the early roots, but we can't do everything at once, so we have to share those jobs and encourage other folks to help us along the way.
And so echoing what Jenna just said, we can't do everything at once, but we can do something. And so that's kind of how we approached our work from the very beginning. We're very ambitious. We love to do great things in the community. We sometimes trick ourselves into thinking we can do everything at once, but we really can't. But we can do some things. And so now we're going to talk about one of those things that we've done to advance that big vision, and it's the Health Professions Affinity Community Program.
Excellent. So I'm going to start out with this platform, HPAC, and I'm going to share with you how we've used this particular program to link together a number of these different variables. It was really unintentional, quite honestly, to begin with when we started out, and we were able to tell a more linear story as things moved along. So I'm going to give you the basic tenets. HPAC is a project that was designed for young people to identify existing health issues in their community. So I'm just going to ask each of you on the phone, think for a minute. Take a moment. I want you to think about yourself as a fifth grader. Go back to fifth grade, picture yourself in fifth grade in school, and think about your context, and think about what you knew about your world at that moment. And think about, did you know that maybe grandma had a condition, or maybe your parents had a condition, or did you see the ads on TV about, you know, your brain on drugs? Can you picture that? Can you see the types of health concerns that were around you in school? And that's where we start. We start really at that point. We ask kids to go back. I chose fifth grade. You could actually even go back to kindergarten. Kids as young as that can tell you what those health concerns are. And what really fascinates us is that no matter which grade, although they get a little bit more accurate when they get older, but not always, no matter which grade you speak about, kindergarten all the way through the college years, if you ask students within a 15, 20-minute period to name the major health issues or concerns in their area, they knock them off, and they'll say things, and I'm going to ask you to think in your own brain right now, come up with 2 or 3, and then I'll share with you. Often it will be things like diabetes, it will be mental health, it will be food insecurity. They are able to identify some of either the risks or the big health concerns within their area that are on the county rankings from within that context. And that's really important because it recognizes to them, well, we help recognize to them that they actually do know the issues and they're aware of what they are, and often we believe because they're in that environment, they know the solutions. They might need some tools from us to help them along the way, but providing those opportunities for them to have those solutions is really important. So HPAC is an opportunity for them to identify a health concern within their area and then work together with their peers in the community to begin to resolve that particular issue. And I'm going to talk you through a bit. Are we going to show that video right now?
No.
We'll go back to it. Okay, great. So we're going to come back to the video that you saw on the screen. But in terms of what HPAC does, I'll explain the model in a moment, but for each student, remember I talked about that individual fifth grader, or now we can take a ninth grader, or we can take a college student. Some of the things that we're really looking at when we help them identify that issue is we're indirectly affecting their academic progress. We're doing inquiry-based learning, which is a critical form to trigger their ability to leverage their existing knowledge, to have reflection, metacognition, and to use their context to feel safe and learn within. We're also beginning to either enhance or start career development. We're beginning to help them think about exploration, commitment, advancement, because we're bringing forward to them this health issue, something that they get, that is near and dear to them often. They always tend to pick things that they care about, and we're having them take that issue and come up with a solution, and it begins the roots of helping them to define career aspirations, hopefully along the lines of health professions. We're also working on personal strengths and persistence in the process and helping them connect to others as they move through this. So we know that if you don't have things, you've heard these very popular terms lately, like Karen Duckworth, grit. You can't make it through, but you can't do it on grit alone. You have to have a variety of these variables. So our program addresses each one of these within the community. Now I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a model. So we start out with this model called ideas. And we have the students, we go into classroom, and we'll say to the students, can you identify health concerns within your community? And the students are often very able to, like I said, name 10, 15 different health concerns. And right now we'll do this in various ways. So sometimes we'll send an AmeriCorps member, sometimes a health navigator, sometimes we work with a teacher ahead of time. Sometimes we have a pastor at a local church that just wants to work with their youth and do it. And sometimes I teach an interprofessional education class at the medical school, and I'll take groups of medical and pharmacy students in with me, not so that they can tell the students what to do for their project, but so that they can learn how the students are thinking and they can learn to think within the context. They identify a pressing health concern. Then the next step, D, they develop a plan or a program around it. And often this starts out with them saying, oh, well, you know, we know about diabetes. This is a very important issue, and we're going to go out into the community and we're going to have, we're going to create brochures, and we're going to tell everybody about type 2 diabetes, and we're going to get them to eat healthier with these brochures. And I'm hoping you're sitting at your desk or the space you're in, and you can imagine some high school students handing you a brochure. And you're looking at them saying, oh, thank you, and then you're walking away going, okay, there we go, that's real helpful. That's their first attempt often. And it's what they've learned in school. It's the model that they do. They've been very structured in the way that they approach things. So part of what we do is we let them fail with that, because that's where the seed of innovation begins. And we also, after they fail at that, we help them realize, did you include the community? Or did you just kind of go out and make a decision on your own what you thought the plan should be or how you should do a program? And we ask these kinds of questions, again, in query-based learning to help them along. The next part is we say to them, look, there are, like Eric said earlier, resources in every community. And we know that if you're very interested in focusing on diabetes and you want to do healthy eating, maybe your aunt, who is a very good cook at home, could come in and teach some healthy recipes. If you're interested in doing a cooking class at school or in the neighborhood community center or at your church or whatever it is. And so we ask them to find partners that are already existing within the community and build resources from there. And then we ask them to assess. We know that you have to reflect. You have to think about what you did, and that once you think about what you do, it gets embedded in your own mind. You have a win there. It increases your self-agency. It increases your community's self-agency. And it also helps you begin to evaluate and measure and put steps together, which is critical for workforce development. If we want students to be able to start out with a goal and with an outcome, they have to know the steps in between, the A, B, C, D. And that's what I often see, and Eric often sees with our medical students, with our pharmacy students, et cetera, is that students don't always know how to put all those things together. The last part is that we like the students to be able to share, because often we see in other contexts things such as athletics. And many of you, I'm sure, have gone to either your own children, your brothers, sisters, kids' games and sports, or your local high school, and everybody's celebrated on a regular basis who does these sports. But the kids who are doing academics and participating in the community and really making a difference in the community, once in a while might be recognized. But on the whole, their efforts aren't seen in the same context. And it's what we show our kids and the value that we show them that begins to change their outlook.
Yeah, and so let me just share with you a story of an HPAC that started up last year. It involved 3 high school kids. One was a high school senior, a female, and then we had 2 high school freshmen. They were both males. And they recognized that in their community that there needed to be more of a focus on healthy living and exercise. And they worked with one of our AmeriCorps members whose responsibility it is to support HPACs, both from the beginning to the end. And in that collaboration, they decided they were going to utilize a walking and running trail that connected their town, their rural town, with 2 other small rural towns. And in this idea, they decided to reach out to community stakeholders to see how could we do a color run or a 5K run even to get people to recognize the trail existed and also create a healthy living and healthy living festival around the 5K run and color run. And then with that big idea, they went to their parents, they went to community members, they went to local organizations like the public health departments and hospitals and little clinics and even a yoga center. And eventually they got the attention of the town councils of these 3 towns and the mayors of these 3 towns, who then connected them to the fire departments, the police departments. They also connected them to a local foundation. In fact, this foundation was owned and operated by an individual who had made a lot of money as a university professor who invented some medical device, and he lived and was from the town that they lived in. They basically pitched their idea to him. He gave them $5,000 in seed capital to develop their festival and their 5K run and color run. He also connected them because he knew the owner of a local marathon timing company that actually is the timing company for the Akron Marathon, which is a city here in our area, which then meant that their 5K run became an official timed event. That then drew runners from all over the place who like to run in these timed events because it then qualifies them for other races. So the net of it was these 3 high school kids and an AmeriCorps member were able to get the whole community to rally around this idea. And it wasn't just one community, it was actually 3 communities. The net of it was that their event drew 600 runners. Each runner paid over $20 to be a part of the race. You do quick math, that's $12,000 in revenue that they generated. And the event itself drew 1,000 people. I was there. They asked me to come and to speak at the event, and I spoke to a couple of the mayors. As it turns out, one of the mayors was a big champion of developing the walking and running trail, and he told me how he never believed that there would be such an event devoted to this trail that he had devoted a good part of his mayoral career to developing. I asked him, I said, how often have you had events like this? He said, we've never had an event like this. And it all started with 3 kids and an AmeriCorps member.
Yeah, and so that's a really exceptional story that we just shared with you. I will encourage you, if you can, to go onto YouTube at some point and look at a video called, if you type into YouTube, Love IT, oh, look, there you go. Thank you for pulling up the slide. I don't even have to say it. That was perfect. So if you take a look at this slide, you can see another example of a project that started out just some kids. They had gotten together. They were struggling with some challenges. They talked about mental health issues. They ended up putting together a little video that they did with their cell phone, and they brought it out to our big event where we showcase all the kids' activities and projects at the end of the year. And on there, you'll see the link, so I'm hoping you'll copy it down. But it's quite easy just to go to Love IT Teen Insecurity and take a look. It's about a 7.5-minute video, but it's well worth your time. And at another point, we can share the outcome of that. Additionally, I'll point your attention to the left, to the Facebook page, and you can see that our kids post. There's Instagram. There's so many different social media outlets out there. This is the one we control a little bit to try to get the information out there. But there's many that Eric and I often fall upon. In fact, we have something called HPAC Mention, where we're starting to track the social interactions of our students all the time. So students can do something as complex that Eric just described, but we've also had students do things along the lines as, like I was talking about earlier, around healthy eating and diabetes. And they have done, in this picture right here, this young man is in the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. He was going to school there, and his younger siblings were at the elementary school, and they learned about lead poisoning. And we have a lot of old homes in Cleveland, and lead poisoning was a big issue. So his HPAC decided that they wanted to test the playgrounds in the local, at the local elementary schools around lead poisoning to see if it was affecting, if there were actually any amounts of lead. And so that was their particular project.
And then they shared their results back with the school, and in that sharing, they not only talked about them as students leading a health initiative in their community, but they then educated the school about lead issues and ultimately shared that information with families.
And it was very fun because they did some stuff in their coursework around this later on, so again, integrating it.
So one of the things I also want to mention, I don't recall whether it's in the slides. Just give me 1 minute. Let me just see, because I may have unintentionally omitted it. We did. So before we get into the Ohio Alliance, let me just mention the growth of this program. So this program started with just Jenna and I and a half-time assistant in our roles as administrators here in the medical college about 5 years ago now. And at the first, we had about 20 kids in a few different schools, largely in the city of Cleveland, who were trying out this new idea that was clearly not fully formed yet. It wasn't what you're seeing here in the slides at all. We were really just figuring it out with the kids in the community. And then over the course of several years, we were fortunate enough to get a great deal of grant funding to support this project. And we went from that first year of 20 kids in a few schools to 100 kids in about 20 schools to several hundred in over 50 schools. And today we have about 2,000 kids in Ohio across well over 100 school districts, all participating in the program. All of them are, learning about the health professions, learning about local resources, learning about how they can become agents of healthcare change in their community as students, and hopefully many of them becoming courageous and also confident in their ability to go to college and ultimately go to medical school. And we've seen many students go on to college, and even some get admitted to our medical school and actually become AmeriCorps members for us as well. So today, with those 2,000 kids all actively doing this work out in the community, it's really hard for us to know exactly the total reach, but we estimate that those 2,000 kids are serving between 15 and 20,000 community members through their health projects. And at this point, it's important now to emphasize that most pipeline programs treat students in a very passive way. They create a curriculum, they bring them onto campus, they show them things, they tell them things, and they think that the fundamental assumption with many pipeline programs is if we show them and tell them things, that somehow it's going to change the intergenerational patterns and thinking in their community about going to college and eventually going into the health professions. And what we know is it's not enough to show and tell. You have to do. You have to empower kids to do things, because that's where real confidence comes from. That's where real skill development comes from. It comes from the doing. And so this program is about doing as much as it is about thinking and showing and telling and conversing. The net of it is that this is a program that isn't just about a pipeline to any college or any health profession. This is also a major, in our view, a major community health initiative.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add on to what Eric said really briefly, that the key to this program, even though we have a lot of grant funding and we were able to use that to leverage what we've done, it's very critical to know that you have to start out small. You start out with one space with one set of wins, and that this set of wins triggers and brings resources in and allows you to recognize resources that you weren't always fully aware of. The second point I want to make is, in addition to that, the other critical piece of this program is called ladder mentoring. And what we do is, by bringing in either a high school kid, connecting them to a college kid connecting to a medical school, connecting a professional, a community person, what we're doing is we're allowing people to mentor one another informally and through an activity. So instead of saying, oh, Eric, I want to hear about your career aspirations, and these are the goals that we're going to set, and Eric's like, oh, yes, that would be very nice. It's going on and doing a project together and gaining that trust and beginning to have what Christakis would talk about is a certain contagion around a social connectivity, and that social connectivity is what drives and change. The emotion behind that helps build a platform in a positive way to utilize the social capital and make change down the line in the community.
Yeah, our program is largely designed to run mostly on local existing resources that kids find and secure with their friends, family, community members. So yes, we have a substantial amount of grant dollars, but it pales in comparison to the total resource being utilized in this program, most of which is totally outside of our control, most of which is in the control of the community and the youth.
Yeah, our youth have written how many grants on their own?
So our youth have written scores of grants, and they themselves have been directly awarded over $200,000 in the past few years through places like State Farm, Siemens, other local foundations like the Romig Foundation for that 5K run I mentioned earlier.
Or the Rotary.
The Rotary.
And they get sent on lot. The other piece that is really exciting is that the idea of HPAC is not to come in and say, hey, we have a new program for you. The idea of it is to leverage on existing things already or support as existing programs. So the idea is if you have a Boy Scout or Girl Scout troop, if you have a program at a high school already, if you have a capstone program going on, if you have a club in a college, it's to add it on and build resource from there, and that gives you a natural wealth.
So I'm noticing we only have 15 minutes left, so I'm going to move quickly into these next few slides and say just briefly that another contextual element that led us to establish what we call now the Ohio Alliance with our partners was a simple recognition 5 years ago, which was at NEOMED we had a number of pipeline programs. Every school has them. But what we found was they were often very siloed, led by an individual with a specific funding stream, and there was very little collaboration among them. And what you see here on the screen are the five that we now currently have. And we recognized back then that we needed to stitch them together so that they were working more in harmony and more in a synergistic way, where, for example, kids in one program would be told about the other programs and be recruited as such.
And the diversification of this is critical. That's what we talked about earlier, was being able to play off of that for resilience. So being connected to all of these different opportunities provides a pathway for kids of all different nature.
So you all may be affiliated with organizations that have a number of programs, and you probably have seen something similar where there is something of a siloed nature. And so our big goal 5 years ago was to say, how can we stitch these resources together internally? And from that general idea and the success that we saw in doing so, we expanded that idea to talk about how can we stitch organizations together. And on the left is a little social network map of organizations. It just uses an illustration to show how a medical college in the middle of the map might be connected to a high school, a foundation, a workforce partner, even a baccalaureate partner. But you'll see in the map there that there are, only a limited number of connections, and if one of those links were to break, the medical college or any of those partners would lose a partner. It's a very fragile and limited network. And this kind of approach is about, usually focused on preserving alliances, keeping them, holding them, not sharing. It's usually about finding good talent and holding on to it and not sharing it. And it's oftentimes about saying how you and I are different from one another, how I'm unique in the network and I bring unique value, as opposed to looking at our common ground. And ultimately we say that in order to advance students into the health professions, particularly those that have not been advanced in the past, we need to get away from this fragmented, fixed pie way of thinking about youth in the community of a certain kind. For example, thinking about the limited number of impoverished kids who go to medical school, or the limited number of African American students who are admitted to the health professions. And we need to start looking at it from the point of view of saying there's plenty more out there, but our system just under-recognizes and underutilizes them. And in order to achieve that pivot point, we need to build a much more robust and interconnected network that's focused on growing the network, sharing resources, and focusing on similarities rather than focusing on differences. And when you make that pivot point, when you start looking at it from a cooperative model, it enables, for example, two medical colleges to start collaborating with one another when, in fact, their history was one where they were competing with one another. And an illustration of that occurring here in Ohio is the growing partnership between Wright State and NEOMED.
And we have multiple other partnerships now with OU, with Ohio State, with, we could just
University of Cincinnati.
Yeah, many that we will normally be competing with, but now we're working together. The last thing I want to say really quickly before we move on to this last slide is I want to remind folks that usually these pipeline programs that exist often have a dynamic leader, somebody who is really great. When that leader leaves the program, what happens to the program? It often diminishes. The second thing I want to remind folks of is that the other thing that we hear most often is, well, we ran out of money. We don't have any more grant money, or nobody will give us money from their budget to run these programs.
Or a budget was cut.
The budget was cut. Can't do it. And so being able to link together other non-traditional resources both Eric and I do research in this area. So for us, part of our faculty time is also spent on the research. So it's doubling up. It's finding different ways to approach it. Go ahead.
That's right. And so ultimately we've created these hubs that are all part of the Ohio Alliance. The hubs are basically organizations that exist with a mission that in some way is about advancing local students in general, to the health professions. On the right, we show you some of the programs that all interconnect to exist within these hubs that are ultimately connected together through the Alliance. And let me just share briefly some of the successes. So we've seen increased membership in the Ohio Alliance. We've been able to obtain several $1 million in new grant funding just in the past year alone. We've served over 2,000 kids through our hubs and our Alliance. We've developed new pre-medical and medical school pathways that are showing empirically validated differences or increases in diversity, commitment to primary care, and commitment to medically underserved. And we are developing now early assurance pathways to our College of Pharmacy to achieve a similar end.
The only thing I would add to that, Eric, is that we've also been lucky enough along the pathway as new opportunities come up, and we had one with community health workers that we hadn't known a lot about, and a new resource to the community. Well, not a new resource, but one that was under-recognized. And, you know, the state of Ohio has become much larger in terms of recognition, so we've combined things along those lines, like having students be trained community health workers get jobs along those lines in our pipeline programs, as opposed to working at McDonald's.
Yeah, and that community health worker training program is a great illustration of something, which is our educational system unfortunately treats students in much too of a passive role. And we believe very strongly, we've been able to demonstrate over the past several years, that students can do a whole lot more just with a modicum of support. And so with, in this case, training as a community health worker, they can affect healthcare change in a way that that isn't necessarily the same way that you consider the traditional pathway to medical school. So that's it for us. We'll now open it up for questions.
Yeah. And so I see a question right up on our board really quickly here, which I will begin to answer. So one other quick point, now that we're done with the presentation, we did not put in here steps to implement, but we have some very easy steps, and if anybody has questions about that, they can get that information from Larry or Eric and myself. So somebody asked, does anyone at a Pennsylvania medical school who's doing this type of research? So we've connected with some folks in Pennsylvania around the community health worker aspect. We worked with some folks at University of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, thank you. Lost it in my head. So we worked with some folks there, and they really liked the model, and we actually were going to do it around a grant, and then the grant didn't get funded, and there wasn't a lot of follow-up, but I know there was a desire. Folks were working on this project focused more on diabetes and mental health, and they were beginning to understand our model as a pathway of helping achieve what they were trying to do in these clinics with community health workers and using youth as social entrepreneurs. And then specifically to Penn State's medical school, we're colleagues with Dwight Davis, who is the admissions dean at University of Pennsylvania Medical College at Hershey, and he's been. I've talked with him before about our program, and he's very interested and invested in doing more in the pipeline program space, particularly with a focus on diversifying the medical college and advancing Hershey's mission. So he would be a great collaborator if there was interest in Pennsylvania to engage the medical college at Penn State. The only other thing I would say is the AHECs, even though we don't necessarily link in Ohio, we link with ours, and we have other states that we link with. So not necessarily. Yeah, we don't link in Pennsylvania, but we do link in Ohio. Ohio, yeah. So just a thought. Other questions or comments?
So, Eric and Jenna, this is Larry. Could you comment on one of the other successes from my point of view is the kind of innovation that's happening not only at the high school level but at the college level. And Baldwin Wallace, as I recall, you told me that they've created a concentration in primary care. So you can literally graduate from college with that kind of focus. Could you comment on that?
Yes, sure. So, with respect to the Ohio Alliance and all these pathways to our medical school, we have worked over the past 5 years to renovate those pre-medical pathways. So now every one of them will have a focus on our fourfold mission of academics, primary care, medically underserved, and diversity. But also we've been endeavoring over the past several years to identify new partners, and one of them that we identified was Baldwin Wallace College. On its own, it created what's called the Primary Care Advancement Program, which is a pre-medical undergraduate program, a degree-bearing program that focuses students on careers in primary care medicine and prepares them for admissions to colleges that have a focus in that way. They have developed articulation agreements with NEOMED. They've also developed them with LECOM and also Ohio University, both of which are DO medical colleges. And in the articulation agreements, we will admit up to 5 students a year during their sophomore year of college who are in this program. I will also mention that Youngstown State University, one of our 40-year-old partners, is renovating its pre-medical partnership with us to be exclusively focused on primary care. It's called the BACMED, B-A-C-C-M-E-D program at YSU, Youngstown State. And you can search on Google BACMED Youngstown State and you'll find it. And its primary focus is on pre-medical education devoted to primary care.
The only other thing I'd like to add, and I know we're almost at the end of our time, the person who asked the question regarding research in Pennsylvania, Eric and I are absolutely happy to share our evaluation system and the way that we're studying things, and we would love to have partners in Pennsylvania. We have them in New Mexico, in Missouri right now, even as far as Portugal.
Yeah, Portugal too, yeah.
Doing the work around HPAC. And so if folks are interested in engaging in that, certainly at the FMEC this year, we're happy to get together with people and share our work and talk about ways that we can collaborate.
So thanks for mentioning that, Dr. Weisblatt. So on Friday, October 28th, from 8 till 5 o'clock, there will be a special program, and this program will be center stage. I won't go through all the details right now, but the chairs of departments of family medicine across the Northeast region are being invited by Stan Kozakowski, who's with the American Academy of Family Physicians. So we're expecting a good number of chairs to be there that day. We are also talking with the Pittsburgh Council on Higher Education. There's 10 colleges in western Pennsylvania that are interested in this. They've heard a very preliminary presentation, and they're very excited about this. Also, Dr. Renee Critchlow from the University of Minnesota will be joining to talk about the LADDER program, which is a way of creating mentorship relationships between high school, college, medical school, residency, out into practice. So all of these pieces will be coming together. We will be inviting through the the NAAHP, the Northeast region, will be inviting colleges and university health profession advisors to come to learn about this. So if there is any interest in getting involved, what our goal through the FMEC is to support this project, to create alliances within each state. One of the things we've learned is when you have a statewide alliance, certain funders get very interested. Yesterday I met with the Grable Foundation, which is in Pittsburgh, and they want to see what comes of this before they will support it, but it aligns perfectly with their thinking, their support for education for the underserved communities. And there are funders in every state that would be very interested in a local initiative. So we'd love to see a Pennsylvania alliance, a Virginia alliance, an Indiana alliance, and then possibly have all of these linked together through something larger. But that'll all be under discussion on Friday, October the 28th. We have just 5 minutes left. Are there any other questions? Anybody else just want to jump on the line and chime in?
Oh, hi.
That Friday, October 28th meeting, where would that be held?
That's in Pittsburgh at the Wyndham Grand Hotel.
Wyndham Grand?
Yes.
And will the directors who are part of this webinar be invited automatically, or do you have to?
Absolutely. Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Madeline DeBeer at the University of Dayton. I just wanted to know more about the steps to implement the program.
Oh, that's such an excellent question. In fact, it was a slide that unfortunately, we left off. The steps are simple. Contact us.
Yeah, we'll shoot you a series of resources.
Yeah, just send us an email. Larry can share the emails, and I promise you we will walk you through the steps. We've become old pros at this part, but because of the limited time we had for the webinar, we knew we couldn't get into the details.
Yeah, and we meant to send an attachment document, but I don't know, time escaped us.
Yes, as a first step, click on a few of the web links and just check out those web links. It'll give you a nice flavor for what we do, and then we can walk you through the implementation process without a problem.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to talking to you, absolutely.
Okay, so I guess expect an email from me shortly.
Excellent. All right.
So you may also want to talk with Kathleen Shelton. Kathleen was at the meeting a few weeks ago where the Ohio Alliance was the commitments were made between the institutions. She's been involved for a period of time now, so she's also very interested.
Yeah, she's down the hall.
Cool. Any other questions?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining the meeting and participating, and we look forward to collaborating with anybody who's interested in a shared mission with us. And I will also add that in case anybody's wondering, this program doesn't cost anybody anything.
Right.
So everything we do is open source and free. There is no financial interest at all in this for us.
Yeah, but we would love to have research partners.
Oh, yeah. And if you want to write grants with us, we're all for that.
So just a
Thank
comment.
you, Larry. Everyone,
let me thank Dr. Porfelli and Dr. Weisblatt, and just to say to the group that's still on the call, these guys are Energizer bunnies. It is so amazing. They figured out, put together all these pieces, and I do believe that not the exclusive reason this is so successful. One of the big reasons is the vision and energy and determination that they've invested in this. So thank you very much for what you're doing for America.
You're very kind, Larry. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.